This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminorouttfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminorouttfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host Ivan, and each week I'll be chatting with some amazing hikers from across the United States and abroad. Spring has finally arrived in the Pacific Northwest, and soon I'll be hitting the trails to record short-form episodes with hikers I meet along the way. Look out for those episodes to drop sometime in June for Season 3. In the meantime, we'll be asking some of your favorite hikers about their experiences and adventures. We always finish the episode off with a round of this or that questions all related to hiking. We have an amazing guest on today's episode. Her name is Karina, and you can follow her on Instagram at PNWYogi_. I had such a great time chatting with Karina on this episode. As someone who has felt the benefits of incorporating yoga to aid in my recovery, not just from hiking but from snowboarding and running, I was stoked to have Karina on the podcast. We speak to her about the amazing work she's been doing, combining her love of yoga and hiking into retreats that are available to the community to sign up for. She also shares her experience hiking both on the East Coast and West Coast, her favorite sections of the Pacific Northwest, and the benefits of incorporating yoga into your hiking routine. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Karina. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm excited today to bring you a really special guest. She'll be sharing a little bit about her hiking experience as well as something that's been a passion of mine over the last 18 months, and that's yoga. And I'm really excited to have this person on the podcast. Thank you, Karina, for joining us today. For listeners that haven't had a chance to follow you and see your content on social media, can you share a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got started hiking?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Karina Baldwin. You can also find me on Instagram at PNWYogi_, like Pacific Northwest Yogi _. And I kind of got into hiking. My big story is my parents were always kind of outdoorsy, but I grew up in Florida. And so there was not nearly as much ability to go hiking, obviously, because it's flat and hot there. And I grew up, didn't know that I didn't actually like the heat because it was just like normal for everything to be hot all the time in the state of Florida. And like the only way to cool down is to get in water. And so like the outdoorsiness was only on vacations, only on the lake or in the ocean and whatnot. And like that's pretty much it. But then as I started to get older, I just felt kind of like a calling to nature. Right around college time, I started spending long weekends in Red River Gorge, which I went to school in Kentucky at the University of Louisville. And so I would spend long weekends like at the gorge or like traveling. And then I graduated a semester early and I decided to become a ski instructor for like 8 months. And so I spent 2016, 2017 ski season in the Lake Tahoe, California. And that's where I think the real start and spark of my love love for the outdoors was. And I also went on my first ever, I went on hikes before, but my first ever like committed hike was actually a backpacking trip with my dad. I want to say I was like 21 at the time. And my first backpacking trip, we summited Half Dome. And
wow.
yeah, so it was kind of like we went from 0 to 100 really quick. And then my second ever backpacking trip, I did the John Muir Trail in California. So I just like dove right in. And for those who had never heard of the JMT, the John Muir Trail, it's a 211-mile trail that basically extends the east side of California. So starting in Yosemite all the way down to Mount Whitney. And we did about a third of it the first time and then a third of it the second time. So my first two ever backpacking trips, one was with my dad and the second was with my mom. So it was very cool to experience. So they definitely like instilled the nature in me. And then to pile ski instructing on top of that. And then I got a job offer in Washington State to work as a mental performance coach for the U.S. Army. And then I spent 3 years doing that. During my 3 years of doing so, I was like, I really love yoga and I would just love to just like have a part-time teaching job at a studio. So I decided to get my teacher training. And so I got my 200-hour teacher training. And then I was like, this is so much more fun than working my 9-to-5 job. So I decided to take my 9-to-5, my mental performance coaching, because I have my master's in sport and performance psychology. And I decided to take that, combine it with my love for nature, and then combine it with my teaching yoga, and decided to now host adventure and yoga retreats all over. So that's kind of like how I came about and like how a very, very quick synopsis of the 28 years of my life. But yeah, so now I host hiking and yoga retreats, adventure and yoga retreats all over all the time. And it's truly so fun and such a gift to be able to do these things. We get incredible humans, averaging anywhere from 7 to 12, sometimes more people. And so they're like smaller retreats, quote unquote, depending on how you look at them. But I think it's the perfect size because it really allows everyone to get to know everyone on the retreat versus being on like a 30-person retreat. You just like by the end of 6 days, you don't know people. And so my goal is to always stay under 18 people because I typically have 3 staff, including myself. So that way it's a 6-to-1 ratio. So it really helps keep people together. And helps promote community within themselves. And they're just able to like really get to know one another a lot more.
Thank you for sharing. So it sounds like you've had a little bit of hiking experience, not just on the West Coast, but on the East Coast. How was it transitioning from East Coast hiking to the Sierra Nevadas and then Washington State?
Yeah, so different, so wonderful. I love the Great Smoky Mountains and I love the Gorge and I love the East Coast, but honestly, the West Coast has my heart. And that's why I stayed out here even after I left my 9-to-5 because there was nothing tying me here. And I actually had an opportunity for a relationship to move back to Florida with my partner at the time. And I was about to, and then we decided that it was not a good fit between the two of us. So thankfully I ended up staying out here and I am so grateful every single day that like that is what my life ended up being because the West Coast, I think there's such bigger, higher elevations. There's bigger changes in elevation, especially in Washington, because a lot of like, I think I live at like 70 feet I think a lot of people think that like Washington is like super high, but like I'm off of the Puget Sound. I'm off of the ocean essentially. And I don't know my elevation of my house, like per se, but I can literally, if I stood on my roof on a ladder, I could see the ocean, the Puget Sound, the bay, right? So yeah, to go from that to, Mount St. Helens and Baker and all of those mountains in my area, it's such a big elevation change. And even the base of Rainier is at like 9,000 feet or something. So it's like crazy that how much elevation gain we get. So I personally love that. I love how like sheer all the mountains are here. I think that it's just so different than the East Coast. And East Coast, I'll go hiking every now and then there, but the West Coast is definitely my favorite for sure.
All right. And Karina, I guess on the flip side, what advice would you give West Coast hikers that are planning to go on the East Coast that they should consider that maybe we don't experience it on the West Coast, but they should definitely kind of keep it in mind?
Bring bug spray. Bug spray
yeah.
is such a big thing because the East Coast is just so humid, especially if you're in the South. So if you're doing the Appalachian Trail, the AT, there's so many bugs in that area. And just like, especially in the summer, which a lot of West Coasters peak backpacking season is the dead of summer because it's finally warm enough, snow has melted, all of that. East Coast, I would definitely say you need to go either in the spring or the fall because the temperatures just get so hot and humid in the South. And in the East Coast in general, you can even head up towards, the Carolinas, Virginia, and you can still hit, it's not as hot as like California or Nevada and stuff like that, but the humidity there kills. You walk outside and you are drenched. So that humidity brings bugs and particularly mosquitoes. And I've definitely been on some California hikes that the mosquitoes get really bad, but nothing it can beat the East Coast and the South of the mosquitoes and just another reason why I'm like, I'll stay over here on the West Coast.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, you kind of deal with mosquitoes here in the West Coast, maybe in the spring for a little bit, but then once it dries out in the summer, they're gone.
Right, yeah. And they only come out at dawn and dusk. Like in the dead of day, like it's not as bad. But yeah, when they do come out.
It's still bad, yeah.
Not good.
Now, you've had a great opportunity to hike all over the Pacific Northwest since you've been here. And you've seen some just gorgeous places. Can you recall the first hike you ever did when you moved to the Pacific Northwest?
I can. I actually did Mailbox Peak as my first one. And for the, Seattle, Tacoma, even just like very, very isolated area of the SeaTac knows Mailbox Peak. It's like 11 and a half miles or something like that. I can't remember what the elevation gain is. And I had just come off my second stint of the John Muir Trail. And so I was very much in hiking shape, but I still remember getting home and being like, oh my God, that was a lot. And I almost didn't make it back to my car before sundown, and sun had already set and I still had like a mile left. And I was like, I need to wrap up here. I have no headlamp. I was not prepared. I was like, I don't know, math wise, like at that point, I wasn't really great at judging, how long something would take me. I think I got there at like 1 in the afternoon. It was still summer, but like the sun went down at 7. So it wasn't anything like super late, but sun was setting. I think it was like late September.
Yeah.
But yeah, I literally Mailbox Peak, and I was with my dog, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get us back to the car. And there was cell service at the bottom, and I was literally on the phone with my mom, and I was like, Mom, I don't know how much further I have because I had no GPS, no ability. I was just like, I think I'm almost done, but I have no idea. And my favorite thing that I thought was so funny about it is like, as I'm coming off the trail, the last like quarter mile. So I still have like, I can't see the trailhead yet, but I see this hiker coming towards me, and I'm like, oh, that's really weird. It's like 7:30 and he's wearing like a drawstring backpack. And he was like, do you know how long this trail is? I was like 11 and a half miles. And he was like, oh, maybe I'll do it tomorrow. And I was like, yeah, probably a good idea. And so he walked a little further, I think, so that way he wouldn't have to walk with me. But yeah, he walked a little further and turned around and came out. But
oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was definitely not my most unprepared story about someone else. I've never, thankfully, knock on wood, I've never gotten in a situation that was like deemed dangerous. I was like, I definitely pushed the envelope there, but I've never been in danger. But I've definitely had some horror stories that I've witnessed. One of which we were summiting Half Dome the next day. And so I've done it twice. I've done Half Dome twice. Once with my dad, once with my mom. This particular one was with my dad. And we were spending the night in Little Yosemite Valley, the backpacking site, the night before. And we see like a cell phone flashlight, like coming down off the hill as we're like getting ready for bed. It's dark. Like everyone's wrapping up, campfires are, getting put out. And we like see these flashlights and we're like, oh, maybe they went stargazing. Like, we don't know that they're coming back from whatever. And they didn't want to bring headlamps, like, or they just didn't, like, whatever, not the end of the world. And then these guys like come up and they're like, hey, do you know how much further until Happy Isles Valley? So like literally down to the valley, another 6 miles, which you have to like pass like 3 waterfalls. So it's like covered, like all the granite is covered in like lychee and moss and
algae?
like, yeah, and algae and water. And so you can slip and eat it. And this guy one has a drawstring backpack, one has a JanSport backpack. And I was like, you're not going back tonight. And they're like, yeah, what's the closest ranger station? We're like in the valley and like, you can't get there.
Oh no.
And they were like, yeah, we just summited Half Dome. And I was like, what time did you summit it? And they were like, we got to the top at like 3:00. And we're like, dude, you had a 16-mile round trip and you got to your top at 3 and or maybe it was 4. I can't remember. Anyway, whatever it was, they were making their way back down in the dead of night. And they had like 20% left on their phone, no headlamps. They had a Cliff Bar and a bag of pretzels, and that was it. And I was like, oh my God, you're going to die. You're literally going to die out here. We can't let you go. Thankfully, there was a Boy Scout group that was backpacking into Little Yosemite Valley. And so the troop leader was like, okay, we can scrounge together a thing. So they stuffed a bunch of Boy Scouts into it. They had like 8 tents or something like that. So they took one tent and distributed the boys into the other tent. And then another group of hikers had that like aluminum foil. It's not aluminum foil, but like the tin, whatever wrapping that like keeps you, emergency blanket. Yeah. And then we kept the fire going because there's like in California, you can't have fires during certain times of year, but in these particular spots in the backpacking camps, there are 2 community fires for backpackers that they can be used, which you're not supposed to camp next to it, obviously, because it's fire. And so we literally because they didn't have any sleeping bags or anything, and they had like a hoodie. And so we put the tent as close to the fire so it wouldn't catch, put them in these emergency blankets. A couple backpackers like handed them a couple Cliff Bars. Everyone has water filters, so like they filter them more water. And these guys spent the night there. And I was just like, if they hadn't come across this backpacking camp, like they would have been screwed. That I just like is wild and terrifying to think about. It's just like, you need to plan, you need to prepare, you got to do your research about the hikes that you do and the backpacking trips and all of that stuff. So
props to you and the camp for taking them in. But that's why I do love the hiking communities, because they do take care of people in those type of situations. Now, kind of coming back to the Pacific Northwest, do you have a favorite region or one that kind of is more memorable from your hiking experiences?
I definitely spend the most time in the Cascades, just along the whole region. In the winter, I spend most time like along Highway 2, like getting towards Stevens Pass and then Mount Rainier for skiing. But when it comes to like actual hiking in the summer, I definitely spend the most time in the Cascades and like basically off of I-90, because that is a little bit closer to the Tacoma area, which is where I live. But the Cascades has just such a wide range of mountains and has the ability to be like, I can be there in an hour, or I can head up into North Cascades National Park, and like that being like the Baker area. And that's like 3.5 hours from me. But the mountains and the lake in the Baker area are just unreal. Like those are like the picturesque, like the Alpine Lakes Wilderness and Mount Baker, like National Forest and like that area, Cascades. Like I can group them all together because the water is just so blue. It's like turquoise. It's beautiful because of the sediment in the water, and it's just like unreal. And so like to have that with the background of these like really gnarly mountains are just so cool to experience. And you can like go in and make the mount or the hikes as hard as you want to, like super easy hike. One of the best views of North Cascades National Park is literally a vista turnoff. So you are in a parking lot looking at one of the best views in North Cascades National Park. And then you can go 20 minutes down the road and you have a 10.5-mile hike that like hikes up and over a ridgeline down into, another one of those alpine lakes. So I would say the Cascades are definitely where I spend my most time and probably my favorite for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right on. And do you have a specific section like Central Cascades, North Cascades, or that section in between I-90 and Highway 2?
I would say the Alpine Lakes Wilderness is probably my favorite. So like pretty much near Highway 2 and like on the easternish side of the Cascades, because that's where like the enchantments are, and which are just unreal. And my favorite hikes because they're just a little bit easier to access. Like they're only an hour to 2 hours away instead of 4 hours to Northern Cascades, which I love the Northern Cascades, but 4 hours, especially when a bunch of my friends have 9 to 5s, it's just like a much bigger trek than, this is an hour and a half. And in Seattle, coming back through Seattle traffic on a Sunday is just terrible. We've had, 4-hour drives turn into like 7-hour drives. And we're like, no one wants that on a Sunday night. No one wants that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's one thing I got to consider. Yeah, the Sunday afternoon traffic, everybody's coming back.
Yeah, for sure.
We've already kind of touched base on it with your journey in becoming a yoga instructor. I personally have seen the benefits of yoga to my hiking abilities and just the recovery, like you said. For those that are interested in yoga, what are just some quick benefits that you've been able to experience, not just in yourself, but in other hikers that do yoga as well?
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit that you get is just being able to do the things that you love without pain. I think we really kind of gloss over the fact that we can move without pain in certain areas, and to really pay attention to how sore you are the next day or how much pain you're in the day after you do something. The more you do yoga, the less pain there is. The more you do mobility practice, you're prepping your muscles and your joints in order to do the things you love. So everyone that's listening to this podcast loves hiking in some way, shape, or form, like whatever that looks like. So actually practicing and prepping the body correctly in order to go hiking. And it doesn't need to be, like, got to do a 30-minute yoga session before I go hiking. Like, you don't. Yeah. Just stand at the car, spend 2 minutes while, you wait for everybody else to get laced up or whatever they're doing, and do some squats and do some mobility in the shoulders and do some lunges and like leg swings, super easy stuff. It doesn't need to be like a formal yoga session in order to get the benefits. And then afterwards, take a minute or two to just do, using the car, do half pigeons on the trunk, like super easy stuff. And before you get into your 2-hour drive home, where you get really stiff and the lactic acid like pools and sits. And then by the time you get home, you spend a few minutes, highly recommend after the shower, because then your body, 1, you feel really clean. 2, because your body's hot. And so the muscles are able to actually release and relax, and, do it in bed, stretch it out, like give yourself the opportunity to like actually care for your body. Because if we don't train our body the way that we want to exercise, eventually we won't be able to exercise that way. If we don't take care of our muscles and our joints, then eventually we'll have to stop hiking. Versus if we do this 2, 3, 10 minutes before and after every hike that we do, you're going to be hiking until you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. I saw a man, one of my favorite hikes that we have out here by Mount Rainier National Park. There used to be a lookout there, but it's being reconstructed. But I was headed up there and I passed a man, and I was like, in my head, I was like, dude, you are old. You are very old. How are you up here? And it's a 3-mile round trip, but you gain, I want to say, almost 2,000 feet of elevation. So it's just like straight up. And I was like, this man is old. Like, he's moving slow, but he's almost at the top. And I was like, sir, do you mind? Can I ask you how old you are? And he was like, I'm 86. And I was like, what? You're incredible. And he was like, yeah. He's like, when I retired, my wife and I moved to the mountains and we do this every day. And I was like, that's amazing. I love that. So that is a person who took care of their muscles and their joints. And from ankle flexion to knee, prevention of injury and supporting the muscles that are around the knee in order to strengthen those muscles, you got to do mobility. You've got to do yoga. You've got to do these things. And like, it sounds like you have integrated it into your daily, weekly practice. And I'm sure you've seen such a big difference in recovery time if you're prepping on the front end. So,
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the biggest benefits I've seen is I always thought that the descent always meant your knees were going to feel some sort of way. But now doing yoga, there's hardly any issues, no pain where there used to be. And I think, like you said, it's that prep work beforehand, but then afterwards, sometimes if I do a hike on Saturday, I'll force myself to go to a Sunday morning class or a Sunday afternoon class, and I don't get the soreness, 2-3 days later. It's really just one day and then it's gone.
Yeah. It's such a big difference when you're actually doing the work, like actually practicing, getting the dedication of the time so beneficial. And you see it more than just in your hiking and your ability to train, right? And if you want to hike faster or run faster or, train harder or squat deeper, like all of those things, that comes from yoga. It comes from mobility. Like you don't even have to do formal yoga. A lot of my yoga classes are actually like mobility classes. We just use a lot of yoga poses to mesh them together and feel transitions. And that's how a lot of my teachings come about, is like seeing the mobility. And I really specialize in those kinds of classes because there's such a big benefit in combining that with hiking. And on each of my retreats that I take people on, every single morning before we go hiking, we spend 15 to half an hour doing mobility practices. So whether it's hit cars or, you're doing pails or rails, which are just like fancy words for different mobility exercises. And like, actually, because I just went through my mobility workshop today that we're recording this, I'm like in mobility mode, but like pails and rails being progressive, articular, isometric loading, and then regressive, articulated isometric loading. So if you need more information on that for all the listeners and stuff, highly recommend just like Googling pails, PAILS, and then rails, RAILS. If you're just like interested in mobility stuff, that's such a good like starting point. And yeah, so it's just really fun to learn how your muscles work and load them properly in order to help you prevent injury, stop achiness in your body and start doing things with ease. And you're able to like get out of a chair without hearing the like, ugh, groan, Or like the day after a hike and you like sit down and you're like, ugh, like we don't need those. We don't need those sounds anymore. We're mobile. We're ready to go, So, yeah.
I love that. And that kind of brings us to the next question. Is one of my favorite recurring segments that you've been doing on your account since you started is you have a fun time striking poses in unique areas, like whether it's a summit. I think my favorite one is you're on a log that's right in front of a waterfall and you're just twisted up almost like a pretzel. What's the thought process for you when it comes to selecting the pose that you're going to do? Is it just kind of something that happens what you're feeling, or does the terrain, maybe the landscape, kind of play a role in what you're able to do?
Yeah, definitely the terrain is such a big factor because like if I'm like the log one, I need to make sure that I had the ability to balance because I was on one leg. So depending on the area that I'm in, if I'm on flat ground without a ton of rocks, I can do some kind of arm balance because I can put my hands on the ground. But if there's a bunch of tiny little pebbles, I don't want to put my hands on the ground because it hurts. So I'm going to keep standing, And so really like the terrain kind of determines a lot of it. And also what is my body ready for? Because a lot of yoga poses, especially the like fancy, Instagrammable ones, need warming up to get into. But you can't really do that on a hike, to like, I can't just warm up into a back bend when I've just been hiking for 2 hours, 3 hours. And so I do things that I know I'm capable of doing cold. And I don't necessarily mean like, oh, I'm shivering, but just like my muscles are cold, the muscles that I need to activate in order to do that particular pose. So the one that you are thinking of on the waterfall on the log is called Dancer. And so that one is a big back bend and hip opener and stuff like that. So that one, because my hips were very open, I was able to do that one fairly easily. But yeah, so the trains, I would say the biggest decider, because I would love to be able to like do all of my like really fun poses that I know I can do. But if there's pebbles on the ground, if I'm next to a cliff, I'm not going to do anything balance wise, So, because I'm just like, I love pushing it, but I don't need to push it that far.
Yeah. And, the other recurring segment that I really enjoyed that you did over the last, I think maybe 2 years, is you have a segment called Yoga for Hikers, and it's a multi-story segment. How did that kind of come about? And what's the optimal, and you kind of touched on it already, but optimal times to do those stretches? Is it before, during, or after, or is it all three?
I would say all three. I would say do it when you feel it. Before you do something, I highly recommend to really focus on dynamic movement. So moving from one area to another. So a really good, easy one is like a lunge position into straight legs. So like think of like either if you know yoga, it's pyramid pose, or think of like half split, like that kind of thing. So like moving that way, a dynamic movement is really helpful prior to hiking. While you're hiking, just listen to your body. Like what is feeling the sensation of hiking? You know, a lot of the time it's your hips, it's your knees, it's your ankles, hamstrings, quads, like a lot of that lower body or even low back. So just like taking notice of what sensations and where, and see if you can stretch it out, because a lot of stretches don't actually need to be like formal stretches. If you bend in a way that feels good, do it. As long as you don't feel any form of heat, like if you feel very hot, if you feel electricity, if you feel shocks, or if you feel like fire ants or like tingling, any of that type of heat, back off, right? That's bad. If you just feel uncomfortable, that's good. So really seeing what that feels like in your body. So before, dynamic stuff. During, just pay attention to your sensations and like get uncomfortable. And then after, really slow restorative movement and holding your poses for over 2 minutes. That's like the biggest thing that people don't do, is holding your poses for over 2 minutes, because whether it's touching your toes, whether it's in a split, it's doing pigeon, it's doing a hip stretch, whatever it is, your fascia, which is the casing of your muscles, that doesn't actually release until about 2 minutes, because it's your entire body is telling it to like, I got to hold on, I got to keep tight, I got to protect all the things that are happening inside the human anatomy. But if you spend the 2 minutes to actually release and relax and, you know, settle into whatever it is, your fascia with the casing will literally let go, which allows the muscles then to expand. Often we're taught like stretching, hold it for 30 seconds. Like, okay, it's better than nothing. Yeah. You're right. Doing 30 seconds is way better than doing nothing, but you don't start seeing huge benefits and huge improvements in your flexibility until you start holding your poses for over 2 minutes. And you'll really see it if anyone ever wants to go to a restorative or a yin class, over the entire hour, you'll do like 8 poses. Like that just shows you how long it is and necessary in order to do those things sometimes. So yeah. So I would say all the time, just do it all the time.
I like it. Yeah. And I've recently discovered yin in the last 6 months, and that's been really transformative for me. Because like you said, it's 8 poses, but it's an hour long, and you just hold it for way longer. And you kind of just feel like you're floating on clouds after class and ready for bed sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I always take it for an evening class, and I'm like, I'm going to go comatose now. Thank you.
One thing that you've already talked about and you touched upon already is you've been able to combine yoga and hiking together on some of your retreats. And some of the locations that you've been able to do these retreats are remarkable. You've done Zion, Joshua Tree. We have a couple other ones coming up this summer in Leavenworth. You're going to be doing Kolchak, another one in Montana, I believe. How did those retreats kind of come about? Because I've never heard yoga retreats kind of combining the love of the outdoors and hiking. With yoga, because normally it's like on a beach or at a resort.
Yeah, I'm very niche because a lot of people see yoga and they're like, oh, I want to sit and do nothing, and which is wonderful. It's just a different type of vacation, right? I love a good beach vacation where I can chill and hang out and do nothing and drink my Mai Tai and like chill. Vacations with me are so different. Like my own vacations personally, whenever I take friends on them, they like come home and they're like, Karina, I'm exhausted. And I'm like, I know. Isn't it great? Isn't it wonderful? And I'm like, let's go do more. And they're like, I need a nap. And I'm like, we can nap later. It'll be fine. No, but I don't do that. I don't do that on my retreats. We always hike. We always do yoga. There's always at least 2 yoga classes a day. So on like a 5-day retreat, we'll do 8 yoga classes. On a 6-day retreat, we'll do 10 yoga classes, which is really cool. So it's really yoga intensive, and that fits under restorative. We have mobility, we have vinyasa. Like I kind of do a little bit of everything. Like I said, I got the idea from my own personal loves of these 2 things. Like I love yoga, I love hiking, I love doing both together. I don't always do yoga on a trail necessarily, and especially not in some of the national parks. Like Zion, for example, doesn't allow yoga to be done inside the national park, which is kind of like a, you know, like what an odd thing to disband. I don't know. But Joshua Tree, they are like, yeah, go do yoga, like whatever. And obviously, everything's permit oriented. So like as a commercial company, I have to get a permit in order to operate inside the national park. But when we're outside national parks, so Leavenworth, we're just on public land, which is so nice. And then Big Sky, we're on public land. So like no permits are required to do all the things that we want to do, which is so wonderful and a lot easier to like curate a retreat off of because there's not as many limitations. But I really combined the two just because there's such good benefits of doing yoga before and after hiking. And I love both. And I love the people that do both. I think they are so fun. Every single person that I've ever met who does yoga as a supplement to their outdoorsy sport. So whether they are hikers, backpackers, snowboarders, skiers, mountaineers, like whatever it is, if they know, they not only do these really cool outdoorsy things, but they supplement it and take care of their bodies on the Monday through Friday, right? They take care of it on their regular days. And like those people are just, they're the best. They're so fun. I love getting to know them and I love learning from them. And I think they challenge me and I challenge them. So it's definitely a very good group of humans that I want to create. And also, I think doing yoga and hiking, as you excel and get better in these areas, you feel so much more confident in yourself. Like when you feel confident on top of a mountain, that translates to your 9 to 5. That translates to conversations you have with people. That translates to, relationships that you have. And you're so much more confident and willing to like ask for what you want when you can do that on the mountain. If you're able to look at your group of hikers that you're hiking with and be like, oh no, I want to go further, or I don't want to go further. I want to turn around here. And like when you gain that confidence to do so, it shows up in other areas of your life. And same thing with yoga, right? Just because a teacher says time to go into a handstand doesn't mean you have to go into a handstand, right? Like your ability to like gauge yourself and be like, you know what? That's not for me. I don't want to do that today. And so it just helps you build confidence and be so much more bold and courageous because you're doing these really hard things. And to actually get into a 5-day, 6-day retreat and go and do those things, I have had people leave the retreats and do very bold things. One of them applied for her dream job at Make-A-Wish Foundation. Another one, she set boundaries. She was working at a law firm and she was like, I don't actually want to work there that much. So she was like, I'm going to cut back my hours. I've had another couple that came on a trip. Both of them by the end of the 6 days were like, all right, we're going to do van life. And they decided to leave their jobs. So I've just had some really incredible experiences watching people feel so empowered by doing these things. I had one retreater, we got to the top of Angel's Landing in Zion National Park. Very incredible hike, put on your to-do list if it's not. And she was terrified going up. There are sheer cliffs on either side and you're holding onto a chain and that's the only thing you've got. So she's on all fours, crawling up, so scared. And we get to the top and she has this full emotional release, bursts out. And she's like, I'm okay. I'm just emotional. And to let that go. And then by the end, she was just she was standing up tall. She was so proud of herself. And I could tell there was such a big change in the start of that hike to her standing at the summit, looking over this canyon and being like, holy crap. I just did this incredible thing. And again, that confidence, that courage, that empowerment just translates to so many other areas of your life. You need to go do hard things, whether it's mentally hard, physically hard. I always say start with the physically hard stuff because it's a little bit easier, I think, to build up the mental toughness of it, right? We start with the physical body because we can fight through some of that pain because we've been taught to do those things, right? So summiting a mountain, just doing hard hikes, long hikes, that kind of thing. There's nothing better than getting to the top and being like, whoo, I just did that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And for the retreats, Karina, you don't have to necessarily be somebody that's an advanced yoga student. It's open for anybody,
yeah,
right?
I say as long as you've been to one yoga class, you're good. And if you've never been to a yoga class, by the time you sign up, you can go to a yoga class. So it really works out. And all it is just learning the language of if Karina says half pigeon, what does that mean? But I demo a lot of the things. I would say training for the hiking is way more important than training for the yoga. So physically, just like if you need to be in, I would say moderate shape in order to do a majority of the hikes that we're doing.
Good to know. Good to know. Now, maybe it's the response that you already gave, but I feel like a lot of hikers have a summit ritual, whether it's at the top of a mountain or maybe at the end of the hike once they get back to the trailhead. Favorite snack, meal, maybe some trail brews, or even just a moment of zen. Do you have a regular custom that you do when you reach your destination or maybe when you make it back out?
Not when we reach our destination. I would say we typically get beers after the hike. And more often than not, when we reach the top, it's very quick turnaround because the people that I hike with, they, for some reason, don't eat nearly as much as I do. And so they like get to the top, they look around, they take some pictures and they're like, all right, and back down we go. And I'm like, hold on, let me eat my sandwich. So I would say my ritual is getting rushed. They're going to love it. When they hear this, they're going to be like, we don't rush you. You're like, okay, tell my stomach that. No, but, I would say we always get beers after or some kind of meal, after a backpacking trip. We try to usually make it back before lunch of that second day. But I would say that's as ritual as I have. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to your pack list, what would you consider to be your current most valuable piece of hiking gear?
I would say my Osprey bladder. I love my bladder, which honestly I haven't been able to find in 2 months. So quite devastated about that because it also has my life straw on it. So I can fill up anywhere and I don't have to worry about filtering and I never have to. It's so nice. I never have to filter. I just dip my bladder in whatever body of water that we're in. And then I'm like, I'm done. And all my friends are sitting there pumping their water. And I'm like, haha.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. Okay. And then on the flip side, has there been a piece of gear that you thought was going to be a game changer, but maybe it didn't live up to expectations or it just wasn't a good fit for you?
I don't know. I would say, I don't know if I have anything that just didn't live up to it. There's definitely some things that I'm like, I don't know if it's worth the money. I haven't personally gotten it, like a jet boil, for example. I have my own stove and it was before jet boil existed is when I got it. So I think it was back in 2014 or something like that I got it. So it's super tiny stove, which is wonderful. And my friends have jet boils, but theirs have broken and or burnt themselves. And I don't know if it's actually, my stove works wonderfully. It's not as fast as a jet boil. And so I'm like, but do I need to spend $60 on a jet boil? So I would say everything I've bought, I've used.
Gotcha.
But jet boil, I'm still in the debate of if it's worth it.
Okay. Now we've touched base on, us experiencing other hikers in distress, but throughout all your hikes and travels, has there been any close calls for you, whether it's nearly getting lost, maybe an unexpected wildlife encounter, Mother Nature might have thrown you a curveball, or just some strange run-ins with people? Any experiences?
I've definitely gotten pretty dang close to bears on accident. That has not been intentional. They just pop, they're just vibing through the wilderness. And all of a sudden it was on the trail that we were on. And I was like, oh, this is a big bear. So that was the closest wildlife encounter that we had. I did once rely on a friend for research and he planned the trip. So I didn't think anything of it to do my own research. I was like, he's got it. He's got the permit. He's in charge. And turns out there's 5 miles where there was no water and it was a backpacking trip and we were going 21 miles and there was 5-mile area that there was no water. We had filled up 2 miles from the start of the 5 miles. So we went 7 miles without filling up water. And it was the dead of summer in Washington. It was 90 something degrees and we're fully exposed in the sun because we're above the tree line. And I drank all 3 liters of my water. Yeah, I was drinking so much water. And because it's so hot, I didn't think I had to ration my water until we're 4 miles in. I was like, hey, I haven't seen water. And he was like, oh yeah, there's no water. And I was like, bro. So him and I got in a tiff about that. I was not happy. And he was like, but you're not going to die. I was like, I don't care. I know I'm not going to die, but I'm dang thirsty. That was about as close call as I've ever done. I lost the John Muir Trail for about half a mile, but we knew there was a lake that we had to get to the other side of. So we just followed the lake. So we were lost, like we were away from the trail, but we were like, the lake is the lake that we need to be next to. We just don't know where the trail meets back up.
Gotcha.
So we weren't super worried, but we definitely had to like butt scoot down some sections because we were like, this is too steep to walk. And we had obviously our packs on and we were in snow because it was June in California. So we lost the trail and we definitely made some hikers behind us very confused as well. So,
Okay. Wow. Glad you were able to find the trail again. And that's one thing. When there's snow, it's hard to kind of get your bearing on where the trail is, especially if it's covered.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So for hikers, Karina, that are interested in maybe getting into yoga, what advice or tips would you give them prior to their first class?
They should set up a consult call with me and talk to me about their yoga practice. They should either send me a message on Instagram because I think every person's a little bit different. I would say the biggest thing is just go in open-minded and try it. But honestly, message me, have a conversation with me, ask me questions, like use me as a resource, use you as a resource, and, go in open-minded and try it. Give it a few tries, because just because you go to one yoga class and don't like it doesn't mean that all of them are that way. Every yoga class is different, even taught by the same teacher. So
good tip. And then for this year, since we're already at the end of January, do you have any upcoming hiking or travel goals for 2023 and beyond?
I want to summit Mount Adams this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, big one. My partner and I want to ski tour it. So hike up on skis and then ski down. And so, that's the goal this year, is to summit Mount Adams, and then maybe another one later in another volcano later in the year. But Adams is the first summit. We're going to do St. Helens in like 3 weeks. We did it last year. We're going to ski tour it this year, and then we're going to do Adams in June. That's the plan. That's the big one that I have.
Nice. All right. I got a couple buddies that do it every year, but they just do like micro spikes, and it still just blows my mind that you can do Mount Adams in a single day if you wake up early enough. And the views from their pictures is just something else. So I'm excited to see you make it up there and skiing down, because they have to trek back down.
Yeah.
But ski down. Oh,
I know.
That's going to be awesome.
Such a good way. I love it.
Thank you, Karina. That was it for the open-ended questions. This last section of the podcast is the this or that questions.
Love it.
I'm going to give you 2 things that are hiking related, and you kind of just choose the one that fits you the best, or maybe the one that you enjoy out of the 2.
Okay,
all right?
I'm ready.
Here we go. First one, ascending or descending?
Descending, for sure.
Waterfalls or summits?
Summit.
Switchbacks or straight up?
I would say straight up.
Trek poles or freehand?
Backpacking, definitely trek poles. Regular, like day hikes, freehand.
Oh, okay. I like that answer. And do you fuel up before a hike, or do you fill up after?
Oh, definitely before and in the middle. I eat every 2 hours, please.
And how about bushwhack or go around?
Go around.
Do you jump in or do you stay dry?
Summers, I will jump in.
Sunsets or sunrises?
Sunset. I'd rather come back in the dark.
Spring flowers or fall colors?
Fall, for sure.
Do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
I never tag hikes, but if you DM me, I will tell you.
Good to know. Okay.
So I just make it a little hard. I don't geotag. I give big locations like Washington or like Mount Baker National Forest and stuff. But if you put in the effort, I will absolutely tell you. But if you're just commenting, I won't put it in my comments. I won't put it in, those kinds of things. So you just gotta work a little hard, because sometimes you gotta do that detective work, No,
I like that approach. Thank you so much, Karina, for joining me on today's podcast. It was really a treat talking to you about not just hiking, but also yoga. For our listeners that are interested in maybe doing your retreats this year or following you on social media, what's the best places that they can find you?
Yeah. super easy. So like I said at the beginning of the podcast, my Instagram is where I hang out the most at. It is at PNW Yogi_. So Pacific Northwest Yogi_. So that's the easiest way to find me is on Instagram, and you can find all the other things. So my website, to set up a consult call, to come on a retreat, all of that is all there. So you can also just go to karinasyoga.com. And if you want to set up a consult call for a retreat and that adventure, that exploration, that community, all of those things, gaining the confidence to go out and courageously adventure and step into that empowerment. If that's something that you want to do, you can set up a consult call. And that one's also super easy. It's bit.ly/retreat consult. But I'll give you all that information. So that way, if all the listeners, you just head down to the show notes and you can click whatever one that you want to do. Retreat consult, check out the retreat, head to my Instagram. And I look forward to meeting anyone who's listening to this, or just send me a follow on Instagram or a DM. I'd love to talk about hiking. I'd love to talk about yoga and adventuring, of course.
Nice. And then, Karina, what open retreats do you have right now that people can still sign up for?
So if you're really looking for the adventure, the hiking, the nature, we are headed to Zion National Park in May. That one is still open for shared beds. And there is one more private room available there. And then we are headed to Leavenworth, Washington in July. All the individual rooms, so the private rooms, are all completely sold out. So there are only shared rooms left. And you can either choose a triple or a quad. And everyone gets their own bed. They're all twin-size beds, super cute. It's in a log cabin, and we're doing Lake Kolchak. So that one's in July, to Leavenworth, Washington. And we'll be floating the Wenatchee River. And then in August, I will be hosting one in Big Sky, Montana, where you will be whitewater rafting. You'll be hiking all around Montana. You'll get to experience huckleberry. And if you've never had huckleberry, if you're not from the area of Montana, Wyoming, huckleberry is the best fruit of all time. And my favorite is to do a huckleberry chocolate milkshake, the best. And our chef loves to incorporate local food. So last time he did like a huckleberry pie. He had huckleberry honey. It was awesome. So he's coming to Big Sky. He's coming to Zion. He's coming to Leavenworth. That private chef, he's just absolutely incredible. He's out of Bend, Oregon. So the food on all of the retreats is just unmatched. So I'm so excited for all of them. And I hope that you and your listeners will eventually come on one.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Karina, for joining us today. It's been really a treat to talk to you and learn about the benefits of both yoga and hiking and some of your adventures. You really you went from 0 to 100 and you haven't looked back. So from that first summit at Half Dome to what you're doing now, it's truly incredible. And I think the practice that you're doing is a result of all that work that you've done. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you once again to Karina for joining us on this episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. Be sure to follow her on Instagram at PNWYogi_ to keep up with her latest adventures in hiking and yoga. For more information on her upcoming retreats, check out the episode notes for her website and to schedule a consultation. We'll be putting out new episodes every week throughout the spring. Please be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on those. Also, follow us on Instagram at Hikes and Mikes. Catch you on the next one. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Flip Socks. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, Flip Socks will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit flipsockswithaz.com and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth and disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of Flip Socks today with the promo code HikesMikes10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.